Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, on this matter of the dueling accusations from the left of Trump colluding with the Russians and from Trump of the Obama administration surveilling him and his people, let's just make a general categorical statement of that sort. Adam Schiff, he's the ranking member of the House Intel Committee. He's the Democrat who represents Area 51. Been really involved in spinning conspiracy theories on the topic.
Well, on Friday, he was able to go to see the evidence for himself.
Yeah, and
they showed him the same information that they showed Nunes.
He issued this statement, which was very un-Adam Schiff-like. Today, my staff director and I reviewed the materials at the White House. It was represented to me that they are precisely the same materials that were provided to the chairman over a week ago. While I cannot discuss the contents of the documents, if the White House had any concern over these materials, they should have been shared with the full committees in the first place, blah, blah, blah. Nothing I could see today warranted a departure from the normal review procedures, and these materials should not be provided to the full membership of both committees. The White House has yet to explain why senior House staff have shared these materials, but only with one member, only for their contents to be briefed back to the White House. The point of that gobbledygook is this.
There's no smoking gun?
Well, Mr. Schiff is arguing process instead of substance. And when you're arguing process instead of substance, that means you have a weak hand substantively. And then there was Adam Schiff with Jake Tapper over the weekend sounding quite chastened by what he saw.
I don't think we can say anything definitively at this point. We are still at the very early stage of the investigation. The only thing I can say is that it would be irresponsible for us not to get to the bottom of this.
Boy, that is
wow.
The kind of measured statement we have just heard from Adam Schiff for the first time this weekend, after he was briefed on Friday. So perhaps the congressman from Area 51 has been chastened by the information he's seen, because his tune is a lot different. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Michael Doran. He is a former Defense Department official and National Security Council member under President George W. Bush. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. And so the change in tone and the walking back some of the more demagogic statements that Schiff has been making in recent weeks after being briefed on Friday, is that your read on it? And if so, what does that tell you about what Mr. Schiff may now know that he didn't previously?
Oh, I think it absolutely, it's absolutely my read, and it absolutely shows that he's been somewhat chastened, starting to realize that pushing this conspiracy theory that Donald Trump is Vladimir Putin's Manchurian candidate is going to be a loser in the long run. So he's shifting the focus over to Russian hacking in the election and hacking in general, and is going to try to talk as little as possible about the Obama surveillance scandal. That's what he's going to do, I think.
Well, do you think that there is an Obama surveillance scandal?
Absolutely. There's the evidence of it is strewn across the pages of the Washington Post and the New York Times. You probably saw that clip with Mark Levin a couple of weeks ago, where he just went through the newspapers and read all the reports in the newspapers that said that the Trump team had been surveilled. So there's just no doubt about it. The only question is the extent of it.
And what about the whole controversy that was surrounding a former Assistant Secretary of Defense, Evelyn Farkas, last week that we talked about in this show, as others did, certainly, where she attempted to walk back in what she had said in an interview on MSNBC earlier in the month about how we knew what we knew, and then she just kind of recast that, saying the only thing I knew was from reading the newspapers. What your kind of deciphering of all of that?
Well, I had a slightly different take than a lot of conservatives on Evelyn Farkas, because a lot of people said, here's what she's doing is she's testifying to the fact that the Obama administration surveilled the Trump transition team. And I read it slightly differently, because she was out of government at the time. So what she was repeating to Mika Brzezinski was what Obama officials were telling her back in early January. And what they were doing at that time was hyping the Russia hacking issue and hyping the extent of cooperation between the issue of cooperation between the Trump team and the Russians. And they were telling her, oh, gosh, you won't believe what we're seeing in the intelligence. It's just unbelievable, right? So they were hyping all of this because that was part of the campaign to delegitimate Donald Trump and present him as if he was installed in the presidency by Vladimir Putin. So what she's giving us is evidence of is not so much that the Obama administration surveilled Trump, although they did. What she's giving us evidence of is the hype of the Russia issue that they were doing back in January.
So is there
her attempt to walk it back was just hilarious because then she said, "Oh no, I knew there was all this intelligence because they weren't telling me anything. I could just see it on their faces. So their silence is what told me this. But no, that's just ridiculous."
Well, then who is it that leaked the information about General Flynn? I mean, I know that's the $1 million question, but that was their parting gift on the way out.
There's no way to know at this point who leaked, who unmasked, and who leaked. There's Mike Cernovich on Twitter on a piece on Medium has said that he has information that it was Susan Rice who did the unmasking, but he doesn't tell us how he knows that. I'm a little bit skeptical. I want evidence, but I'll tell you this: it was a conspiracy. It wasn't just one person, and I'll tell you why. The intelligence, when it comes to you from the NSA, is voluminous. Somebody had to sort through all of those intelligence reports and find the ones that pertained to the Trump transition. So, first of all, you had to have people comb through the reports and pick out the right numbers. Then somebody else, probably somebody else, because it requires a high level of clearance, and you'd want to do it through one person, ask the NSA to unmask the names. So you have a team picking through the intelligence, a small, trusted cell. Then you have somebody unmasking. And then you mentioned the General Flynn thing. Mm-hmm. This is where it turns into even more of a conspiracy because somebody leaked that information to the press. And if you go back and you look at the David Ignatius column from January 12th, in which Flynn's name and Flynn's conversations with Kislyak are described, you see that it wasn't merely the information that was given to Ignatius. They didn't merely say, oh, Flynn talked with Kislyak. They also said, and it was part of this cooperation between Trump and Putin. So in other words, it was pushing an information operation. So the person who disseminated it was a spinmeister. So I think you have at least three elements here. You have the people combing through the intelligence, the people unmasking, the person or persons unmasking, and then the person who's pushing the information operation. They were initially surveilling in order to collect political intelligence on the Trump team, one assumes. But as of late December and early January, they started this information operation to hype the Russian threat and to hype the connection between Trump and Russia. And that required pushing intelligence out into the public. So those are three different elements of this, and that's what makes it a conspiracy.
Well, and
I'll just add one last sentence. Sorry. It's extremely unlikely that President Obama didn't know about this.
Well, I mean, if all of that turns out to be true, then boy, we've got really an explosive story. Particularly what you suggest, we assume, which is that this was initially political or surveillance for political reasons to gather political intel, using the state to gather intel on a opposition party candidate and his team. And so that leads me to the question about Clapper, Brennan, and Yates. Nunes canceled a hearing that was planned for last week with two top intelligence officers and the former Justice Department. So Clapper, former DNI, Brennan, CIA, Yates at DOJ. Would it behoove Nunes to kind of figure out the back and forth between he and Comey about the nature of testifying before the House Intel Committee and get Clapper, Brennan, and Yates to testify to what they know about some of these questions that you're raising?
I don't want to second guess Nunes. I saw that letter that he sent out on, I think it was March 15th, to all the intelligence agencies, asking them. He particularly honed in on the Flynn leak, and that's important because the Flynn leak is a crime. It's a felony, in addition to being a breach of the public trust. So it was smart of him to do that. The fact that he did that shows me that he's thought, I think, a few steps ahead on this.
Well,
thing.
so if you won't second guess some of that, let me ask you another question in our limited time, which is some people have suggested Donald Trump should declassify some of the information that's been obtained, like the documents Nunes and now Schiff has seen. What about that? Trump declassifying documents to let the American people in on what members of Congress know, to bring them along in this investigation and take some of the cloak and dagger nature of the back and forth allegations out of the investigation?
That's one I haven't understood. I think it would be a good idea. He doesn't necessarily have to declassify everything, but he could put together his own team in the White House to go through everything that they have and to build now that we have an understanding of how this surveillance was carried out, probably at least a partial understanding, to put together a really thorough dossier with a description of what was done, and then he could bring in Senate intel in addition to House intel to look at that. I don't know why they've chosen not to do this. It would have been. I think maybe he felt that people wouldn't trust him. Who knows? Maybe he himself didn't completely understand what he can do with his executive powers. But I think that would be wise, yes.
Okay. All right. Good. He is Michael Doran, former Defense Department official, as well as a member of the National Security Council under President George W. Bush. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.